MGM's famous slogan used to be that they had more stars than there are in heaven. Well, today, almost every single one of those stars are long gone, and so is MGM. It's now Sony Pictures, and we're going to walk around the entire outside perimeter of this iconic studio, learning about the early history of MGM. And then the lovely people at Sony are allowing us onto the lot so that we can see exactly where Lana Turner called home for almost 20 years. The Hollywood sign was built in 1923. It originally said Hollywood Land. The land part was removed in 1949, giving us the sign that we still see today. And the original sign was only a year old when the most successful film studio from the golden age of Hollywood was born, MGM Studios. Ironically, not in Hollywood, rather Culver City. Today, it's Sony Pictures Entertainment, which operates out of what used to be MGM's main lot, the only lot remaining from the days of MGM. And right there is a 94-foot tall rainbow sculpture by artist Tony Tassett, created as an homage to the 1939 classic MGM film, The Wizard of Oz. It was unveiled back in 2012. I'll tell you why it says Columbia Pictures there later. But you can see the Sony Pictures water tank there. MGM in its heyday was just absolutely huge, gigantic. In addition to what we're looking at and where we're going today were two other parcels of land that each had backlots on them. I believe the property had a span of 3 miles, just massive. All those backlots are long gone now, destroyed by fire and demolition beginning in the 1960s during the decline of MGM. There's so much history to MGM. I'm overwhelmed, to be honest with you, because there's so much I'd love to talk about, but really it would need its own tour, which I'd love to do someday if Sony would oblige. But I'm still going to pack in as much of the early history as I can in this tour because, like I said, it's where Lana Turner spent almost 2 decades of her life, 18 years. It was her, well, I was going to say second home. I think it was her main home. This was her studio. This was the place that the majority of her career took place. Without MGM, I wouldn't have climbed another mountain today to tell you about her. But I think it's also fair to say she did a lot for MGM too. She joined their roster of stars in 1938 to what was then a 14-year-old movie studio, but one already full of esteem and prestige. Didn't happen overnight though, and it wasn't always MGM. Nebraska-born real estate developer Harry Culver began his land purchase back in 1913, and by 1917, this was incorporated as Culver City, California. Population 530. One day, however, in 1915, Harry Culver, he took a drive out to Pacific Palisades where he stumbled upon Inksville, a movie studio that sat at Sunset Boulevard and the Pacific Coast Highway, which is just nuts to me. I don't think that many people know that it existed. It's rarely mentioned anymore. A studio on the ocean where at one point Henry Ford, as in the man behind the automobile, and Thomas Edison, as in the man behind electricity, they were invited to Inksville to be entertained. Inksville, it was created by Rhode Island-born producer Thomas Ince. Now, I've mentioned Thomas Ince on a few of my tours because he is the producer who was found dead on William Randolph Hearst's yacht in 1924. Oh, they've made movies and written books about that night. Many people think and thought that Charlie Chaplin had something to do with the murder. It really rocked Hollywood. Anyway, Culver, he supposedly introduced himself to Thomas Ince, who was outside on a movie shoot. Long story short, they hit it off, and Culver convinced Ince to move his productions inland and to build a studio in Culver City. Longer story even shorter, Thomas Ince convinced D.W. Griffith and Max Sennett to team up with him, and they did, forming Triangle Studios right here in Culver City. Now, D.W. Griffith, probably one of the most important men to ever exist in the world of cinema, a legendary director. And Max Sennett, well, if you watched my tour on Hollywood's first murder scandal about the murder of director William Desmond Taylor, then you know all about Max Sennett, another icon of early cinema. But the reason that these men called it Triangle Studios wasn't necessarily because there were three of them, but rather because of the triangle shape of the property, formed by three streets: Washington Boulevard, Culver Boulevard, and Overland Avenue. And between 1916 and 1922, they made close to 300 silent films, including Fatty and Mabel Adrift, starring Fatty Arbuckle and Mabel Normand, two people who are heavily featured in that murder mystery I covered. Well, in 1918, after the addition of some more sound stages and buildings, Thomas Ince sold his share to Sennett and Griffith, and then 3 years after that, a man named Samuel Goldwyn entered the picture. Samuel Goldwyn was originally Samuel Goldfish. That was his actual last name, Goldfish, but he changed it to Goldwyn. You know Tony Goldwyn, Carl from the movie Ghost, and he also played the president on Scandal? He is Samuel Goldwyn's grandson. What? Well, his grandpa Samuel, like the Warner brothers, was a Polish immigrant born somewhere between 1879 and 1882 in Warsaw. He lied about his age to avoid the Russian draft, so his birthday is actually kind of iffy. He ended up in New York City, and then next stop, Hollywood. Now, along with Jesse Lasky and Cecil B. DeMille, the trio formed the Jesse L. Lasky Feature Play Company, and they are who made Hollywood's first full-length feature film in 1913. It was filmed in a tiny little barn that currently sits across from the Hollywood Bowl. I featured it in my Whitley Heights tour and that tour on Hollywood's first murder mystery. Well, Goldwyn, he left Lasky's in 1916, and by 1919, he had acquired Triangle Studios right here. I'm really skipping over a lot of the technical business aspects regarding all of these acquisitions to save us some time, but Goldwyn had some other business ventures. All these guys did, really. But Triangle Studios was now in his possession, and it was now called Goldwyn Pictures, and they did okay. They struggled, and by 1922, Goldwyn was out, gone from the company that bore his name. It was basically a slowly dying company, but 2 years later, another man entered the picture, a man named Marcus Lowe. Marcus Lowe was a New York born film exhibitor and businessman who owned a series of theaters in New York. You know Lowe's cinema chain? Yeah, that's him, still in business. And there's a little tribute to him still on the lot today. But with the success of Lowe's theater, he was frustrated by the amount of films being made. Not enough. Here he had all these successful theaters, but not enough product in his eyes, so he comes to guess where? Hollywood, and scoops up Metro Pictures, a film studio which was started in 1915. They were located over in Hollywood on Cahuenga Boulevard, and Lowe acquired them in 1920. Now, a few years into owning Metro, Lowe wasn't pleased with business. And once again, long story short, Lowe decided that the best thing to do would be to also acquire Goldwyn Pictures and merge the two companies. So he did. Metro and Goldwyn. Now, even though Sam Goldwyn was no longer at the studio, he persuaded Lowe to let him keep his name on it, and Lowe obliged. Now, along with Lowe's merger of Goldwyn Pictures came this property, and perhaps most important of all, Goldwyn's trademark Leo the Lion opening that you see before every film. Metro and Goldwyn, it had a nice ring to it, but there was still a third piece of the puzzle missing. Enter a man named Louis B. Mayer. Do you know how lucky we are to still have part of a film studio that's over 110 years old? A studio that was there for the very beginning of film with sound, film with color, the very start. A true paradise for film fans, for old Hollywood fans. There was absolutely nothing like MGM Studios, and Sony, they've really done an excellent job of keeping it all up. It's actually been declared a historic landmark, which means they can't really do much with it anyway, which is great. They shouldn't. And it really, it really kind of feels like the 1920s, the 1930s out here. And if you listen quietly, you can still hear Louis B. Mayer yelling at someone. And don't worry, you can pretty much forget about all the names I've mentioned so far, except for his. His is the only name who will stay with us throughout Lana Turner's career. I mean, is there a more recognizable studio executive name from the golden age of Hollywood than Louis B. Mayer's? Maybe Jack Warner. Mayer, though, what a, I don't know, titan, a tyrant, a father figure, a monster. He has been called many things. There are so many stories about him, and he's been the inspiration for so many characters like those men in power, head honcho types. He almost doesn't even feel like a real person, such a caricature. But he was real, and he was Lana Turner's boss. Louis B. Mayer was born in the Ukraine-Russia region in 1884 and immigrated to Canada before arriving to the United States. Most of these men, by the way, were poor immigrants, working from the bottom of the barrel up to the top. And he loved silent short films as a kid and eventually owned a series of theaters in the New England area. But by 1918, he was married with 2 kids when he uprooted the family to move out here, where he formed Louis B. Mayer Pictures in a very small studio over in East LA. Again, I'm skimming through his beginnings kind of quickly to get us to the part of the puzzle when, you guessed it, Marcus Lowe stepped in. Lowe, he had his brick and mortar right here. He had the production side of everything, really, but he needed someone to oversee it. So he acquired Louis B. Mayer's company and his last name, giving us, the one and only Metro Goldwyn Mayer Studios, better known as MGM, which was officially founded on April 17th, 1924. Stage 25 was one of many, many sound stages used for MGM's probably most remembered film, The Wizard of Oz, a movie that neither Thomas Ince nor Marcus Lowe lived to see. Ince died in 1924, the same year MGM launched, found dead on the Hearst yacht. Lowe followed 3 years later, just as MGM was hitting its stride, and when he passed, Variety called him the most beloved man in show business. Now, I know I said Louis B. Mayer was called many things, but I don't think beloved was one of them. Mayer, however, wasted no time proving who was in charge. When production on the silent film Ben-Hur was spiraling out of control in Italy, he flew over, shut it down, and moved everything back to MGM. He said there was no need to be in Italy, and that they could create Italy back in Culver City by rebuilding the Colosseum and other sets around town and on the MGM lot here. He also replaced lead actor George Walsh with Ramon Navarro, and the film became the most expensive of the silent era at nearly $4 million. But it paid off, becoming one of the most top-grossing silent films of all time. And Mayer's vision, it was clear. MGM would make lavish, big-budget spectacles as well as smaller pictures, but they would all be wholesome, family-friendly entertainment, suitable for everyone, no boundary pushing. He wasn't looking to provoke through cinema. He just wanted safe, polished, glamorous storytelling. And he loved eye candy. Gorgeous stars, stunning sets, and elaborate costumes. And he would run the whole empire like a factory. Stages 26 and 28 were both used for The Wizard of Oz, and stage 28 later became home to Full House from 1987 to 1993, and Married with Children from 1994 to 1997. Mayer probably would have loved Full House, and he definitely would have appreciated the volume of television it produced each season. More than 20 episodes in one season. Quantity, it was his thing. At MGM's peak in the 1930s and 40s, they were cranking out around 50 films a year, almost one movie a week. MGM really put the factory in Dream Factory. And again, I'm giving you this history of MGM because you must have an understanding of how this place operated, because it will follow us throughout the tour. MGM, Louis B. Mayer, they're crucial characters in Lana's story, and when they're mentioned down the road, I think you'll feel much closer to the stories. Mayer essentially invented, or at least perfected, the studio system. He did have a right-hand man helping him, and they worked on this place sort of like it was on a conveyor belt. Acquire the story, then use one of their contracted writers, assign a contracted director, and the actors, well, we'll cast them from our stable of contracted stars. Their slogan, it said it all: more stars than there are in heaven. And if you were one of them, you signed a contract and you made those movies. Very rarely did you have much of a say. Joan Crawford, one of MGM's biggest stars, reportedly joked that she may as well have had "Property of MGM" tattooed on her backside. That, of course, was said when she was portrayed by Faye Dunaway in Mommy Dearest, but Joan stood up to him. Some stars did, and some stars didn't. Every department, though, hair, makeup, wardrobe, props, sound, editing, even publicity, it was right here on the lot. All of it designed to make films as efficiently and cost-effectively as possible. Mayer and crew ran a very, very tight ship. The MGM stretch of Washington Boulevard, it ends at Soundstage 29, just before Overland Avenue, where, guess what? The Wizard of Oz filmed its Poppy Field and Kansas scenes. And that's what's so magical about a soundstage. One can become Kansas, and then it can become San Francisco for the Tanners on Full House, or Chicago for the Bundys and Married with Children. And this used to sit right next to the back lot of the main lot here on MGM. And again, all of the back lots are long gone now. Once filming on location became easy, they simply weren't needed anymore.
I've been very fortunate in being honored in many ways, but this stands out above all because it's from the men and women in the industry I love and have worked so hard in. And it fills me with humility and a great sense of responsibility to the future years to come.
If this property is a triangle, then Overland Avenue is the base, and from here to Culver, this entire portion of MGM was lot number one's back lot, which, by the way, a back lot, it's part of a studio lot that's exposed. Unlike the sets that are built on sound stages, back lots are usually really big, open, well, city streets, exteriors of buildings, gazebos, fountains, sets made up to look like outdoor locations from all over the world. There's no gate accessible to the public over on Washington anymore. The main gate where you saw me talking was closed off once it became too small for the modern car. This is one of two gates here on Overland Avenue. And I can't say for sure when it was built, but it was definitely sometime after MGM dissipated in the 70s. The studio that once grew to having a total of 6 lots suffered terribly by the 1960s, and after the 70s, 5 of MGM's lots were sold and everything was auctioned off. The main triangle lot here is the only lot left. And MGM merged with United Artists at first. Then it was sold to Lorimar Telepictures, who made Knots Landing. And then by 1990, Columbia Pictures moved here, which, along with TriStar Pictures, was owned by Sony Corporation, which, of course, still owns the studio today. Culver Boulevard today has the most gates onto the lot, but I think they're a little more exclusive. If you come take a studio tour or go to a taping of Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune, you'd go to the Overland Gate, but this one is more employee related or people with meetings, appointments. And speaking of Jeopardy, there's a peak at Soundstage 10, now called the Alex Trebek stage, where of course they film the show along with Pop Culture Jeopardy. And I can safely say that Jeopardy is the one television show I have not missed an episode of in probably a decade. We watch Jeopardy every single night and have been to a handful of tapings, which are so much fun and quick. Jeopardy gets you in and out, which I love. Even though Columbia Pictures didn't move here until the 1990s, there's a lot dedicated to its history here on the Sony lot. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town was a 1936 movie starring Gary Cooper and Jean Arthur. And then Happy Madison Productions, Adam Sandler's film company, which used to be housed here on the lot, they remade it starring him and Winona Ryder in 2002. And those New York City looking buildings there are all part of an area that's usually reserved for events and screenings, sometimes shooting. There's a little town square nearby, kind of a little park. It's the closest thing they have to looking like an old backlot. I love this streamlined modern architecture very much, but it's actually the building next to it that I'm most excited to talk about. The final building before we reach the Triangle Properties peak. It's the crown jewel of the lot, and the man it's named for was the crown jewel of MGM. But before we cross the street, I just wanted to show you quickly that there's a parking garage named for our dear friend Thomas Ince down the street, but we are right across from the backside of the Irving Thalberg building and gate number 1, reserved for the most important people, just as Thalberg was. Now, if Louis B. Mayer was the king of MGM, then Thalberg, he was definitely the prince. He was essentially the architect of the studio system, the very system that not only built but ran Lana Turner's career. Irving Thalberg was the opposite of Louis B. Mayer in so many ways, which is probably why they made such magic together. Their oil and vinegar chemistry was almost perfect, and they were side by side at the inception of MGM. Before that, in fact. Born May 30th, 1899 in Brooklyn, part of Thalberg's drive, it came from a childhood diagnosis of a congenital heart failure. Doctors, they told him he'd probably never live past 30. So, as a teenager, he went right to work as a secretary at Universal Pictures in New York, and he eventually made his way to the West Coast studios where founder Carl Laemmle showed him the ropes. Thalberg, he looked around and essentially told Laemmle that his studio system was a mess and that he needed a manager, so then he created that job for himself. Well, Laemmle, he was so impressed that he left for the East Coast and he trusted, get this, 20-year-old Thalberg to run the whole studio. Now, you know Max from the movie Sunset Boulevard. He was played by Erich von Stroheim. He was actually a famous silent director before that role. And he directed at Universal while Thalberg was in charge, and he became notorious for overspending and going over schedule, and nobody, including Laemmle, had the nerve to confront him. Well, young Irving, he quietly and calmly shut down production, removed von Stroheim from the set, and edited the footage himself. He was such a genius at everything he did, it earned him the nickname Boy Wonder. Now, Laemmle, he wasn't the only one who recognized Thalberg's genius. Louis B. Mayer did as well, and a couple years into turning Universal Studios around, their paths crossed, and Mayer, he basically poached Thalberg and said, look, I promise to treat you like family if you come and work at Louis B. Mayer Productions. Well, Thalberg accepted and became vice president in charge of production. So, when Marcus Lowe bought Mayer Productions, Louis B. said, my VP Thalberg is coming with me or MGM's not happening. And Lowe said, fine, sure thing. So from the very, very start, this MGM factory, it was run by Mayer and Thalberg, and in my opinion, many people's opinion, actually Thalberg did it better. He had style and he had taste. He had an incredible head for business like Mayer did, but what Mayer didn't have was the creative, artistic side that Thalberg had. Thalberg, he had the perfect eye for packaging films and creating stars. Without Thalberg, the early stars of MGM, they probably wouldn't be the stars we know today. Greta Garbo, Joan Crawford, Spencer Tracy, Jean Harlow, Clark Gable, and perhaps his favorite star of all, his wife, Norma Shearer. She was a Canadian-born actress who was actually discovered just before MGM merged, so she sort of came with the sale, so to speak. A lot of actors came with the merge. She and Irving, they married in 1927, and 3 years later, she accepted the Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance in 1930's The Divorcee. She was the third actress to win the relatively new Esteemed Acting Award, and it wasn't MGM's first Oscar either. They actually won the second Best Picture Oscar ever, 1929's Broadway Melody, the studio's first full-length sound picture. MGM, they would go on to win the Best Picture Oscar a couple years later in 1932 with Grand Hotel, then again in 1935 with Mutiny on the Bounty, and again the following year in 1936 with The Great Ziegfeld.
We just say that I'm happy that Mutiny on the Bounty won this morning. And the several thousand men and women who played in this picture, I'm sure will share this happiness with me.
In just 12 years at MGM, Thalberg, he oversaw more than 400 films. But 1936 was also the unfortunate year that utter tragedy rocked the world of motion pictures. On September 14th, 1936, Irving Thalberg died at the age of 37 while on vacation with his wife, Norma Shearer. His health, it had been declining for years, and in the end, he and Louis B. Mayer weren't on the best of terms, but it never put an end to Thalberg's desire to make movies. And his funeral, it was attended by just about every star from the studio and then some. This was probably no exaggeration, the most revered behind-the-scenes man in motion picture history. There's a reason the Academy Awards hand out the Irving Thalberg Memorial Award periodically, only to those with a very esteemed resume. His loss, it just marked the end of a special, special kind of filmmaking.
Not only Hollywood, but the entire film world and the general public mourn the loss of Irving Thalberg, the brilliant producer who has died at the early age of 37. In showing these pictures, taken a few years ago, we extend our sympathy to his widow, Norma Shearer.
Well, we have completed our triangle tour. This building here, it's basically the point of the triangle with Madison Avenue passing through the tip, giving us the Madison Gate here. This leads you right to the front of the Irving Thalberg building. In the MGM days, you could drive right up to its front, but now this gate gives it more privacy. But lucky for us, we get to go on to the lot and see this magnificent structure up close. Something that I think you need to know about Irving Thalberg is that you'll only ever see his name once, maybe twice, in the credits of the hundreds of films that he produced, and that is because those happened posthumously. He never believed in taking credit, saying that credit you give yourself is not worth having. Well, Louis B. Mayer, we know he took credit, but he also had this exquisite, beautiful building built in honor of Irving Thalberg right after he passed, and it was completed in 1938. It would become the meeting place for all of the important executives, and the third floor, that would hold Mayer's legendary executive office with a private dining room up on the fourth floor. And if Mayer saw Columbia Pictures hanging right there above the main door, he would die again. I mean, we're talking about a rivalry from over 100 years ago, MGM versus Columbia, rival studios in the golden age, but we film lovers, we old Hollywood fans, we love both studios in this day and age. I'd actually love to do a whole Columbia tour. They were great. 100 years later, these classic films, they just don't compete with each other anymore. They've sort of become one. We love them all, and I love Sony for honoring these studios as beautifully as they have. Every square inch of this lot is so pristine, so beautifully well kept, and the modern architecture, it just takes my breath away every time I see it. Which used to be often. I actually used to work here on the Sony lot in the casting department on the TV show Shark Tank for a few seasons, beginning in 2012 through 2014, and sometimes I'd take the long way between buildings just so that I could pass by this gem. I've never been inside though, only peeked, and I'm hoping that the lobby still displays, I believe, 12 Best Picture Oscars from MGM and Columbia. And how about this? Beginning in 1928, the second year into the existence of the Academy Awards, MGM received either a Best Picture nomination and or win every single year up until 1946. An 18-year streak. I mean, they'd even go on to get more after that. Clearly, they succeeded after Thalberg passed, with Mayer now free to run the studio his way, but his way, it was heavily influenced by Thalberg's. I mean, Mayer would have never gone over to Italy to save Ben-Hur had Thalberg not orchestrated the whole thing. He set the mold, the pattern. Mayer followed it, but in Lana Turner's case, not nearly as well as Thalberg would have handled her. I'm actually kind of sad that we never got to see Irving Thalberg's Lana Turner. Yes, Louis B. Mayer created a superstar in Lana, but it was clumsy at first. No direction, no vision. But I have to correct something I said back at Warner Brothers. I got my MGM guys mixed up, and I accidentally said that Louis B. Mayer wanted Lana for the Marco Polo movie. It was actually the G in MGM, not the M. Samuel Goldwyn, he is who put her in that movie. Lana didn't have anything to do with Louis B. Mayer until director Mervyn LeRoy, who put her in her first film, They Won't Forget, called her up to tell her that he was leaving Warner Brothers because Louis B. Mayer made him an offer that he just couldn't refuse, and he'd now be contracted over at MGM Studios, and he wanted Lana to join him. She would be making double what she made at Warner Brothers, $100 a week, enough money to rent a small house in Laurel Canyon for her and her mother. So she jumped at the chance, and on February 20th, 1938, Lana Turner signed her contract right here at MGM, just 12 days after the redheaded actress turned 17. Soundstage 15, one of the largest in the world. It's been home to quite a pedigree of art. Ray Donovan, Silicon Valley, Air Force One, the early Spider-Man films, and 5 of the Rocky movies, including the original. But you know what I'm going to tell you? Wizard of Oz, they used it to build the yellow brick road scenes that wind throughout the film, which also happened to feature MGM's very own Judy Garland, Lana Turner's very first co-star here on the lot. 3 months after signing her contract in 1938, Lana was cast in Love Finds Andy Hardy. Now, you think they make a lot of sequels today. This was the 4th in a series that would eventually total 16 films. The movies followed the lives of the Hardys, an all-American wholesome family. Mickey Rooney, he played Andy, the overly energetic teenage son who finds himself torn between 3 girls in this movie: Ann Rutherford, Judy Garland, and Lana Turner. Judy, she only had a couple of films under her belt, but she had been paired with Mickey before in Thoroughbreds Don't Cry. They had such great chemistry that I think they made, 10 movies together over the years? But as far as the Andy Hardy series goes, this was the most successful one. And it exemplifies the factory-like production that Louis B. Mayer had going on. The film, it was shot between May and June in 1938 and released, get this, in July of that year, a month later. Talk about a fast turnaround. And it ended up becoming the 9th top grossing film of 1938, and it solidified Mickey Rooney as one of the biggest stars in the world. And it's also worth noting that during the filming, Judy, she was in a terrible car accident that broke some ribs, and it really banged her up. 2 weeks later, however, she rallied and returned to the set the day after she turned 16. Lana, she played Cynthia, a teenager who liked to kiss boys, and she filmed her part in less than a week. She had also told producers that she wasn't a fan of the nickname Hollywood had given her, the Sweater Girl, and she said she wouldn't appear in any. So Mayer was like, fine, put her in a bathing suit. He allegedly said something to the effect of, well, without the sweater, what do you have? And Mickey Rooney, boy, could he pull. He dated some gorgeous ladies in Hollywood and even married Ava Gardner. Lana wrote in her book that she never dated him, but that he was a huge part of a large group of people that she would frequent the Sunset Strip with, mostly to go roller skating. These 3 teenagers, they fooled everyone with this hit movie because Mickey Rooney had a gambling problem so big that Louis B. Mayer installed a phone line in his dressing room so that Mickey could make bets through his bookie. And poor Judy, her nightmare relationship with Mayer was just beginning as she was battling her weight with diet pills. It's a true testament to just how great these kids all were. Watching this movie, you'd never know any of that was going on.
I'm getting dizzy. Oh, maybe Cupid is after me. Maybe love has found Andy Hardy.
Andrew Hardy, you tell me who she is.
Oh, Cynthia Potter.
Oh, that awful red-headed creature.
These sound stages, they all have plaques on them commemorating some of the television shows and movies that were filmed in them, but they pretty much just list the big ones, the ones that you would recognize, so it's not entirely clear where all of the MGM movies were filmed. But Lana's second one with MGM was Rich Man, Poor Girl, co-starring Lou Ayres, who, despite starring in All Quiet on the Western Front and Johnny Belinda opposite Jane Wyman, he never really hit movie star status. The movie, though, was a financial success, but it really didn't leave a lasting impression. Lana didn't even mention it in her memoir. Her third film, however, Dramatic School, that was a bigger deal. MGM had high hopes built around Louise Rayner, fresh off back-to-back Best Actress Oscar wins for The Great Ziegfeld and The Good Earth. Rayner, however, she was frustrated that 2 Oscars had landed her in a film that, well, she didn't believe in. She and director Robert Sinclair, they fought constantly, creating tension for the entire set. When it was over, Rayner walked into Mayer's office and told him she worked from the inside out and that she had nothing left inside her to give. She felt like a tool in a factory, so she went home, packed up her 2 Oscars, and fled the country, saying goodbye to Hollywood and her film career. She was really ahead of her time, not meant for the studio system. But get this, I actually met her once in the late 1990s. The Academy invited former Oscar winners to appear on stage, so she left London and returned to Hollywood, and it was at the post-Oscar Vanity Fair party where I got to meet her. She was there with actor Roddy McDowall, and, well, I had to go up to her. She could not have been lovelier, though, and I just remember Roddy McDowall being so fascinated by someone who wasn't even legally allowed to drink yet, even knowing who Louise Rayner was, but I did, and I was just in awe. And he was holding, I don't know, their programs from the show or something, and tucked inside, he had this small picture of Louise. I think maybe it was handed to him by a paparazzo or someone. I'm not sure, but he asked me if I wanted to have Louise sign it, and of course I did, and she did. It was all surreal. I still have it. He himself was just such a huge fan of old Hollywood. He died later that year, but Louise, who was 88, I think, when I met her, went on to live another 16 years, passing away in 2014 at the age of 104. What a life. And Lana Turner did not care for her. She preferred their co-star Paulette Goddard. Everyone loved Paulette, a breeze to work with, and the most beautiful woman that Lana had ever seen up close. Just radiant, she said. And Paulette, if you don't know her, she starred in 2 Charlie Chaplin films, Modern Times and The Great Dictator. And she'd also go on to be one of the women in MGM's 1939 hit. Lana, she really admired the fact that Paulette had clothes made for her. Lana, she got hers from the wardrobe department, and Paulette, she also wore her own jewelry, which was real, nothing costume. Paulette also came super close to landing the role of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, but Lana said that making this movie had a huge impact on her because it was then that she decided she could either be a Louise Rayner or a Paulette Goddard, and she wanted to be a Paulette Goddard. And speaking of Gone with the Wind, Lana Turner also tested for the role of Scarlett O'Hara, but to be fair, almost every actress in the universe did. And although it was an MGM movie, it actually filmed a few blocks away at what was then Culver Studios. Nothing of that movie was shot here. But Lana, unlike most of the actresses trying out, knew that she was totally wrong for the role, yet she did a screen test out of obligation, and she was horrified when years later it was made public and shown on television. She was so embarrassed.
Lana Turner.
I love you.
Isn't it enough that you've gathered in every other man's heart today? Must you have mine, too? You cut your teeth on it.
Oh, no, don't tease me, Wesley. Oh, I do love you.
Pretty sure that was the ghost of Clark Gable walking through the front door of this building named for him. The king of MGM, they called him, Rhett Butler himself. And this is actually where we had offices for Shark Tank. I've been in this building many a time. My job on that show, it was to basically babysit the contestants, the entrepreneurs, as we called them. Once they arrived on the Sony lot, I would pretty much take them wherever the show needed them. I'd be driving these people around on the studio golf cart, most of them flown in from other states, and I'd be giving them these unwanted, unprovoked history lessons of the studio lot, teaching them everything about the golden age of Hollywood, whether they were into it or not. I was in awe pretty much every day for the few years that I worked here. I'm still in awe. I'm in awe right now. Sony gives tours here. Come do a studio tour or come do a taping if you get the chance. I love it here so much.
Hollywood coronation. Clark Gable and Myrna Loy were crowned king and queen of the screen.
Sir Gable, on behalf of the 20 million fans, I present to you this kingly crown. Thank you, Ed. You know, I've played gamblers, newspapermen, Klondike miners, and now a test pilot. But this is the first time I've ever played the role of a king. I'm deeply grateful to the motion picture fans who voted for me. Thank you.
Lana Turner's next small role came in the film Dr. Kildare, co-starring Lou Ayres again, but it was Lionel Barrymore who Lana loved working with. She said that he liked to put on this front, that he was a cranky old man, but said he was actually fun and that he kept her on her toes as an actress, but the movie, it just wasn't anything special. She was hoping her next movie would be, though, Idiot's Delight, co-starring the king himself, Clark Gable. There was a scene that called for Clark to sing and dance around 4 blonde girls, one of which was to be Lana's role. So MGM said that she would have to bleach her hair. And she hated the idea, but again, she's now a contract player and they do what they're told, because if they don't, well, there's a dozen other girls who will. So off to the hair department she went, and from that point on, for the rest of her career, the rest of her life, Lana Turner was a blonde. A blonde who ended up going to the hospital, though, instead of to a soundstage with Clark Gable. Years earlier, when she was 14 years old and living in San Francisco, Lana had her appendix removed, and the surgeon botched it pretty horribly. She had so much scar tissue around her ovaries that her menstrual cycles became extremely painful, so she underwent an operation to fix everything, which unfortunately meant having to drop out of this movie. While in the hospital, though, she received a pile of mail from concerned fans wishing her well. It was very clear to her and very clear to MGM that Lana Turner was on her way to becoming a star who would eventually go on to share top billing with Clark Gable very soon. Here comes your shocking reminder that while everything I've mentioned about Lana Turner here at MGM was going on, and while Mickey Rooney was gambling, and while Judy was struggling, all three of them were getting their high school diplomas. They were children, and all the MGM children, they had to attend school right here on the lot in what used to be MGM's Little Red Schoolhouse. That's how it started out in the 1920s before this new one was built. Sometime in the early 30s, there's a really great photo of MGM icon Jean Harlow and her fiance Paul Byrne, and MGM producer and director, on the day that they announced their engagement, and they're sitting right out front of this building. It almost looks like the exact same front door is still here. And that was back in 1932. I'm going to do a story on them one day. There is also a great photo of young Elizabeth Taylor out front of the school, who also attended here as a small child, starting her career, but she was younger than Mickey, Judy, and Lana, who attended here at the same time together. And Mickey and Judy, they also attended Hollywood High School, but by the time Lana signed her contract here, she was done with that school, and she finished her education either here in the school or in between shooting on set. The child laws were way different back then. And Lana actually felt ridiculous going here. She was 17. She liked to smoke cigarettes. When Miss McDonald, the MGM teacher, told her she couldn't smoke in the schoolhouse, Lana said, "Fine, I'll raise my hand to go to the bathroom. You'll excuse me, and I'll go smoke there. Then I'll return to class when I'm finished." Miss McDonald was like, "Fine, sure, okay." I mean, Lana was way beyond her years. She was also on a working schedule like any adult. She was to report at MGM each morning at 6 a.m. sharp, hair and makeup at 7, rehearsals beginning at 9. Then they would do a final rehearsal with props and hopefully get a few shots in before lunch. Then they'd break for lunch. Then back to hair and makeup to fix everything that smudged or wilted during lunch. And then shoot, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning. Judy and Mickey, they would sleep in their dressing room sometimes, but Lana, she now had a brand new red convertible Chrysler coupe, and she preferred to drive back to Laurel Canyon or sometimes to her new boyfriend's house, Hollywood lawyer Greg Boutzer. Today, and for quite some time, this building has been offices for many, many people over the years. At one point, I think it was Amy Pascal's office. I heard that Nancy Myers used it as her office when she made The Holiday and Something's Got to Give. But no matter who is occupying it, the name above the title will always be Joan Crawford's. And if there's one star from MGM's family tree who should have a building named for her, it's Joan Crawford. And look, I can enjoy the Mommy Dearest movie and some of the campy Joan Crawford anecdotes, but give me 1920s, 1930s, 40s, 50s Joan Crawford any day. One of the best movie stars to ever movie star. She did silent movies. She transitioned effortlessly into sound. She was a beast at the game, and she dealt with every single obstacle thrown her way, including this new starlet named Lana Turner. Lana really fell in love with Greg Boutzer. He was her first lover, and he did everything the right way as far as she was concerned. He was way different than any of the actors she had been sent out on dates with, and she really thought that they had something special, including a sort of promise ring that he gave her. They were seen out and about together a lot in public, and Greg even took her to big Hollywood parties, including a few at Joan Crawford's house in Brentwood. Lana said that these parties, they would often end with Joan ushering people into her screening room where she'd put on one of her films for everyone to watch while she clicked away at her knitting needles. Lana said that she never really spent too much time talking to Joan, so she was completely taken back when one day Joan summoned Lana to her house to talk about Greg Boutzer. If you think for a second that I am the type of person who would take Lana Turner's 1982 autobiography, Lana, the Lady, the Legend, the Truth, with me to the Sony lot so that I can read exactly what she claimed Joan Crawford said to her, then you know me very well. All right. When I arrived, she greeted me cordially and fussed over making me feel comfortable. Now, darling, she began, you know I'm a bit older than you, and so I may know some things that you haven't learned yet. Like what? I asked, thinking that she was quite a bit older. Well, dear, when you're young, you see things a certain way, but that's not always how they are. As you get older, you realize that life can be very complex. She continued rambling as I grew more and more fidgety. Finally, I interrupted. Joan, what are you trying to tell me? Looking back, I sometimes marvel at the acting performance Joan delivered there in her living room. Sincerity overcame her. Her hand went to her forehead, then to her heart. Agitatedly, she reached for a cigarette, then fumbled with the matches. Finally, she got it lit and drew in deeply, gearing herself for the thrust. What a thrust! Well, darling, I feel it's only right to tell you that Greg doesn't love you anymore, that he hasn't for a long time. I could only stare at her, too stunned to speak. I couldn't let you go on, hoping, believing, because you see, Greg wouldn't tell you. Darling, you've simply got to know that what Greg and I have is real. And it's been going on for a long time. It's me he truly loves. She gave me a direct look, and her eyes hardened. But he hasn't figured out how to get rid of you. Well, by then I was outraged. Get rid of me? Trash is something you get rid of, or disease you get rid of. I'm not something that you get Dear, dear, now I know how you feel. Don't you dare say you know how I feel. You are lying to me about Greg. I know this isn't true. Oh my God, I'm getting so into it. Hold on. But why should I lie to you, darling? He loves me, only me. My head was whirling. Was she telling the truth? Maybe I'd suspected Greg was seeing other women, but Joan? Was I crazy, or was she? I sat rooted in my chair, clutching the arms. She was still talking. So, Lana dear, why don't you be a good little girl and tell him you're finished, that you know the truth now and it's over. Make it easier on yourself. He doesn't want to hurt you. Thank you, Joan, I said as calmly as I could. All I wanted was to get the hell out of there. I was starting to tremble with anger against her, against Greg. And the incredible hurt, well, I was damned if I was going to let Joan Crawford see it. The minute I got home, I confronted Greg. He strongly denied it. Had she made it all up? I wanted desperately to believe him. Maybe she was jealous of me, or she'd gotten herself into some kind of hysterical state. I grew more and more confused. I spent evenings agonizing over where Greg was, who he was with. Then I'd see him and start to believe all over again. I constantly swung from love to hurt, to rage, to humiliation. It's funny what you remember. Deep Purple was a popular song then, and many times I had danced with Greg to the romantic melody. During that period of doubting Greg with all my girlish heartbreak, I recall that I couldn't bear to hear that song. In fact, I couldn't stand it, or the color purple, for years. Lana Turner and Greg Boutzer eventually fizzled out for plenty of reasons. Joan Crawford was just one of many women in his life. She was crushed at first, but barely had the time to feel. She threw herself right into her career that was only getting better. She traded in her agent Zeppo Marks for Johnny Hyde, a VP at the William Morris Agency, who would later go on to represent an actress named Marilyn Monroe. Lana was now making $250 a week, an astronomical sum back then. She made yet another movie with Lou Ayres, too. This one was called These Glamour Girls, and this time she had better billing. But despite having a larger role, it was just another forgettable movie that didn't do much for her or MGM. But her next film, that was going to change the trajectory of her life by introducing her to her first husband. We were only allowed a short window in here today, so we have to get moving, even though there will be a lot more stories from Lana's almost 2-decade career here. And before we go, I wanted to show you stages 27 and 24. This one is where they built Munchkinland for The Wizard of Oz, and these last two stages are two of the only small reminders that Lana Turner was once the biggest star on this lot. They're not much, and ironically, they mention her final film at MGM, a big failure called Diane. And on her last day of filming, she said, like many MGM titans have said in the past, there was no fanfare. She just got in her car and left. She said that the biggest goodbye came from the guard at the gate.